detected. Begin sequence.
Today we're going to go back in time, all the way back to the 80s, and where it all began for me. And look at the Atari VCS video computer system, well, the 2600 as it was known a little bit later on. Now guys, this is where it all started for me, and I know, look, you guys will all have your own special system that you grew up with. I'm sure some of you guys might be a little bit younger than me and might have started off on some systems later than the Atari VCS, but I'm sure every system that you can think of, if you're into games, and I'm sure you are if you're watching this channel, there'll be a system there that's very special to you. So even though yours might not be the Atari, I'm sure you can relate to the fact that this guy is extremely special to me. Now, I still find it amazing thinking back to those times, back in the early 80s, and when the Atari VCS first came out. I got it for Christmas, guys, and I got it with a few games, and I immediately took to it. It's bizarre. It's like it wasn't even foreign to me, even though it was all new technology. I had played Spaces, of course, in the arcade, so I was right up in terms of understanding the new medium. And my parents bought me this for Christmas, and I remember, you know, seeing this big box under the tree, and all wrapped up, and I didn't know, guys, what it was, because, you know, back then there was no internet or anything. Of course, I only got my information from magazines, and I was in New Zealand as well, so in Christchurch, New Zealand. It was, you know, it was a smallish country town, really, and New Zealand didn't get a lot of imported goods. I mean, they did, but you sort of didn't know about them unless you sort of went into town. Now, I was, you know, 11 years old or whatever, so it's like it wasn't sort of going into the city and doing shopping and knowing, you know, what the latest stuff was. So fortunately, my parents, and especially my dad, had a bit of an affinity for computing stuff. He was sort of getting into it for his work side of things, so he picked this up, and you know, when I opened it on Christmas Day, I was so happy. I was so happy, and that started effectively the love affair with Atari, at least, starting off in those early days. And guys, the thing is that I spent, I don't know, it would have been probably a year or just over a year with the VCS, and I played it to death. It was different back then, guys, because you didn't have the sheer amount of games, obviously, that we had today. And I don't know how many of these other ones were out and released at the time. And obviously many of them released over many years after it originally came out. And I know I got this pretty much when it first came out. I know this isn't there's one more other box that's more original to this. This isn't actually the box that mine came in. Mine one was long gone, unfortunately. I did pick this up at a later time, but there was another one with different wording on here, which was around the very first Ataris. But I will show you here that this shows the picture of the 6-switcher, which is the one I actually have working with us today, and that was what they call the heavy 6-switcher, because I had the RF shielding in there, a bit heavier than the later ones. And then the later ones did away with a couple of the switches and put them on the back, so they ended up with 4. You know, it was the Darth Vader version, which was the black one and stuff. So the original one was the 6-switcher. That was the one I had. After this system, I then took on the Atari 800. It was another very fortunate. I was very lucky as a kid, actually, very fortunate to get that. And I don't think that was a Christmas present. No, that was really bought for the whole family, but at the end of the day, I was the one that used it. So that was the Atari 800. And from the Atari 800, you know, from 12, 13 all the way up to the time I left Christchurch to come to Perth was pretty much the computer that I used all that time. And I have sort of talked about the, that period of my life and the switch over at 19 coming to Australia and different interests and stuff. I will revisit that, because when we sort of get back and talk about the Sony PlayStation and stuff like that, I want to talk about that, because it was really quite interesting. I think it's interesting listening to people on YouTube, guys, and their sort of particular journey and the systems that influence them. And I'm sure with you it's the same story, right? There's different systems all the way through your life that influence you in a certain way. But what an amazing system the Atari video computer system was, guys. It's just absolutely tons and tons of software. We'll sort of flick through here. These are all the ones that are on the main virtualize. Of course, it's nice to check them out, and then if you like them, go buy the originals, which I've been collecting some of them. But an absolute amazing amount of games came out, and of course that's what caused part of the crash in '83, the video game crash, just because there was just so much junk coming out actually. Ever since then, there's been people still doing homebrew for the VCS, or the Atari 2600 as it later became known. And that's amazing. I find amazing as well what some of these programmers were able to do more recently with the hardware. But even back in the day, guys, the Atari video computer system was pretty primitive. It had very little in the way of memory and graphical capabilities, and the programmers really did some super tricks to get it to display the sort of things that it did. And having said that, it is of course very, very primitive by today's standards, but there is an inherent gameplay mechanic in there, guys, that that's what it was all about. And remember, without anything else to sort of compare it to, for me back then, I was absolutely in heaven, sitting down in the lounge. The big, I don't know what it was, CRT would have been, I don't know what, 38, 40 inch, something, which was big, I guess, in the day, a 50 inch TV, sitting down in the lounge, and very, very fond memories indeed. And I owe my whole career in IT, actually, progressing all the way through the IT field, was really started with this. And in a way, I think my father actually sort of bought it for me with that intention in mind. He thought I'd get in early into electronics and computing as it was kicking off. So he had the foresight to see that this side of things was going to take off, and I lapped it up because of the games. And of course, later on, when the Atari 800 came out and we got one of those, I started getting into a bit of programming, and I didn't become a programmer, but I dabbled in lots of different things and related to IT over the years, guys. And it's been an amazing journey. It really has. So I owe it all to the Atari VCS. So many good memories in there, and it's so nice to have the original hardware running up through the OLED. Doesn't really give the OLED justice, mind you, but it still looks damn nice in terms of a CRT replacement for playing these console games, so I'm really happy about that. But now I've got it running through there, I actually feel like I need to buy some more of these to fill in the gaps and play some more, because these games, guys, they have a certain quality to them in terms of their rawness, the raw gameplay. It's down to that sort of that whole concept of, the Flappy Bird thing, where Flappy Bird was extremely popular with simple graphics and all the rest of it because it's simple gameplay and all and that's what these games are about. And they're more complex in a way than obviously Flappy Bird is, but they have this real raw dynamic, which is hard to explain. But and I think this is why the Atari was so successful at the time, guys, even though it didn't quite look as good as like the ColecoVision, I think, in the television. It just had this gameplay, and the joysticks, the hardware, and the paddle controllers. It just made it an just an all-in-one system that felt right, that just played right and was engaging. They had all the license names to all the big arcade games, even though they, right royally stuffed up things like the original Pac-Man. But I think that's, that a big part of that. And of course, with marketing and all the rest of it, they really, really took it home and conquered the market earlier on, and then obviously got superseded by other systems. But I really love going from these old systems up to the arcades, and then playing modern day games. It's just, I don't know about you guys, but for me it's heaven to be able to do that. If I could have thought way back then when I was 11 that I would be able to do what I can do now and have all these machines that I've got here now, this would have been my idea of heaven back then. I would never have thought, or wildest dreams, that I would be able to have this sort of setup. So again, extremely grateful and thankful to have all this. Hopefully you guys really appreciate your collections too, and stop to think, sometimes I get so caught up in these games and everyone complains and carries on about some of these games. It doesn't have this, doesn't have that, the graphics are really poor, blah blah. And it's like, the stuff that's being produced, even the indie stuff, there's heaps and heaps of work has gone into those games, and there's some real classy games out there, some amazing indie games, and that just blows me away. And we are really, really lucky, and we're really spoiled to have the selection of games that we have. So anyway guys, that's it for another session. Thanks again for everyone who have subscribed. Please subscribe if you haven't.
You belong.